Pure slavery has no hope. Abraham Lincoln said this in 1859, talking about the slavery of the African American people. Now, many people have thought that the Civil War ended slavery in our country, but there is just a different type of slavery that still plagues our nation today. And this type of slavery is called sex trafficking. Now, sex trafficking or sex slavery can be defined as the exploitation of women and children for the purpose of forced sex work, according to Thronthimus.org. Now, I'm credible to talk about this subject because I have done lots of research on it, but I also would one day love to work for an organization that helps to bring these victims out of this bondage and to help start the healing process. I don't think that this subject is talked about enough, and more things should be done about it. But today, I'm only here to present to you the facts about sex trafficking. Things like what sex trafficking is, how it works, and what the life of a sex slave is. Now, the term sex trafficking, or just trafficking in general, may make you think of illegal immigrants being forced into prostitution by human smugglers. But in reality, 83% of confirmed sex trafficking cases in this country were of American citizens. And of that percentage, the average age of girls being sold are between the ages of 12 and 14, according to a documentary done by Diane Sawyer of NBC News. Now, the big question surrounding this topic is how in the world these girls got into this situation in the first place. And to tell you the truth, it's pretty simple. There are generally two ways that traffickers, also called pimps or johns, obtain their women. And the first is through romancing and coddling women's emotions through the internet. In an interview done with a girl through the Women's Funding Network, she explains that many young girls try to find their identity, acceptance, and love from anywhere, and men through the internet can do this for them. She also stated that they make you feel loved, cared for. She stated that most girls end up falling in love with these men online. This takes patience on the pimp's part, but once he convinces a girl that he loves her and will take care of her, she will go anywhere with him and do whatever he says. But he basically ends up not being the type of person that she thought he was, and is now trapped under this man's ownership. The second way that traffickers tend to obtain their women is through reeling in women who live as runaways or prostitutes on the streets. ForceForCompassion.gov says that 55% of women living on the streets are currently already engaged in sexual slavery or are at risk of being in sexual slavery. Women living on the streets are more vulnerable to sex trafficking because they are more open to offering bribes or offers given by the sex traffickers, such as love, money, food, shelter, and sometimes even drugs. Many women are willing to endure the abuse, torture, and forced sex in order to be cared for because they really do not know any other way of life. Many often ask, why don't these victims just leave their traffickers or pimps? And this question would be considered illogical if they really understood the bondage that they're in and the ownership that these traffickers have over them. Malika Scar, an activist for human rights, stated on the topic of sex trafficking that once girls are lured in by their traffickers, they are routinely raped, beaten into submission, and are often branded. She also stated that girls would be forced to sleep with anywhere between 6 to 15 men a night. And usually the pimps force their girls to walk the streets, which basically means to literally walk the streets and get into any man's car that's willing to pay for them. Each woman a night is supposed to meet a certain quota or earn a certain amount of money for their pimp and give that money all back to the pimp. And if they don't do that, they're either sold to another pimp, which is usually happening online, beaten, or given punishments, like solitary confinement or maybe not even being fed. And when girls try to run away, escape, or seek help, the traffickers often torture them, gang rape them, and threaten to murder them or their families. These women are completely powerless and are enslaved under these men with no choices of leaving. Slavery can be defined as holding someone and forcing them to do things against their will. This term was used 160 years ago to define the brutality against African American people and should still be used today to define the brutality against these powerless women and children who are violated, tortured, held, and forced to do things that no human should ever have to do. I hope that today I shed a little bit of light on a subject that tends to be dark and pushed aside and pretend like it's not even there. People say that history tends to repeat itself, and it does. We had slaves 100 years ago, and we still have sex slaves in America today. People may say that we're the land of the free and the home of the brave, but not everyone is truly free.